修行遠慮開心論定有略十目如来要言調整無輪小学第四コール実法開門精進三昧智慧意徳無量修正敬具人体前年小分崩壊愚人人の空語在体無明欲ぬ生存用無人の死死人徳無量空君広大知恵人妙光明意相神道大仙願が差分在小法華道生じ未不下段不正上位解任精進要税三昧知恵以上合成特物不行志願一切空空一差大安下死無分百千億万無量大小修行語者供養一切死と勝負不尿具道検証不逆異尿語者小分世界無不影無修仙道光明師匠変死小国行税精進異人難量量が差分雑国道第一五種奇妙道場超然国如内四二無闘争ガト愛民道断一切実法来生新年少女意図が国経楽安穏公文信用税が心象本願の非力少々欲実法生存知恵無下上領子孫知が信行軽量心死食毒中画行精進忍術不敬ナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブ願にしく毒平等性一切道本母大心往生 Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman Navs Naman Navs Naman Navs Naman Navs Naman.
Okay, please join me in Gassho. Those who reach the pure land of happiness return to this evil world of the five defilements. Here, like the Buddha Shakyamuni, they benefit sentient beings without limit. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. The other day, today I wanted to talk about the other day, my son asked me, he said, Papa, are you going to die someday? Right? So he asked me this question while I was kind of brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed. So I knew I had to kind of treat this situation very delicately, but I wasn't too sure how serious he was asking me this question. So I replied, honestly, and I said to him, yes, someday, I'm going to die. And then he said, is Mama going to die? And I replied to him that yes, someday we are both going to die. So then I tried to tell him this honestly, and he started to cry very loudly, and in fact his mom had to come over to kind of console him, and she made him feel a little bit better. But we both tried to explain to him that we were both going to physically die, but that we will always be with him, and that Amida Buddha teaches us this lesson, this teaching, and that is why we do Gassho in front of the Obutsudan, and that is why we do services, because the Buddha teaches us this teaching. So I was really moved to see, my son, crying and learning for the first time about death. But as a Buddhist minister, I believe that it's against our values to lie to children by telling them that death is not real or that it does not happen. I think there are ways to explain it that doesn't make it so traumatic, but I think it is realistic and wholesome to be honest about the truth about life and death. I told him that Papa and Mama have to one day die, but that we will never leave him alone. Um, and so the Buddha is the person who showed us not to worry about death and to be separated from Mama and Papa. And that is why it is very important to put our hands in Gassho in front of the Buddha. But nevertheless, my son was still very sad of the whole situation. And since then, our son asks us sometimes, why do people die, right? Do you guys have to really die? As if to say, like, like he's kind of confirming this, asking this question over and over again. But, sure enough, the answer is always the same. He gets a little quiet, and he could see, and I could see that he's trying to, understand this situation of why, people have to die. So this incident kind of reminds me so much of the story of Shakyamuni Buddha and how he comes to understand suffering and what suffering is. As you might or might not know in this story, Shakyamuni Buddha was this, king. He was a prince that he was very coddled by his father, and so he wasn't allowed to leave the royal grounds. But he, at a certain age in his life, in his 20s, he gets very curious to see what is outside of the castle walls. So he ventures off, so he goes out of the four gates, we call it, the east, south, west, and then north gate. And so he sees different things. And the first thing that he sees is an old person. And then he sees a sick person. And then he sees a corpse, a dead person, right? And then finally he sees a wise person, a monk, a mendicant monk. And then through these things, he experiences for the first time death, and it is explained to him that these things, these forms of suffering, are inevitable, that every person has to go through these things. So if you could imagine the shock on this person who sees all these things for the first time in life. He was in his 20s, in the prime of his life, and his dad never allowed any of these quote unquote unsightly things to be seen in front of him. I think, this story happens to all of us at some point in our lives, and why this example is so powerful. We might easily forget the first time we come to know about old age, or about being sick, or about what it means to die and what a dead person is. But I guarantee that you did ask about these things at some point in your life. But with all these things, we become so used to it and desensitized to it over time that we hardly think of it anymore, right? As adults. But with death in particular, there's nothing we can do about it. When we die, that's it, or so we think. My son is eventually going to learn that it is easier to just not think about this problem rather than to think and grapple over this issue. Why? Well, first of all, the answer takes your entire life to figure out. So there doesn't seem to be a quick solution. To think about death is such a uh, it's such a headache, and no one wants to think about it. And it's not fun to think about death either, right? So it's just easier just to put it off, or to just not think about it and ignore it, and just act like it doesn't exist, right? But it really does. But Buddhism's goal is how to overcome this issue of suffering, the issue of our own mortality, of our own death. And this is precisely why Shakyamuni Buddha embarked on his spiritual journey, which eventually led him to enlightenment. It is what we are doing here, embarking on our own spiritual journey to understand the meaning of life. We are here to come to terms with suffering. In other words, we are here to be able to overcome the fact that we must eventually die. If this isn't a problem for you, you are still thinking that death is still far off, that death is something not to worry about now, that it's something that happens later on in life, right? But the only way to truly understand and accept life is to be able to accept death. And it's so easy to forget that part of the deal, right? But this is what my son's predicament shows me. My conversation with him is a lesson to me. Takashi, are you reflecting on the meaning of life? Are you, or are you just worried about what your next meal is going to be? That is why they say that children are the best teachers of ourselves. If you don't have children, you can see it in children in general, right? Children teach us as adults, a lot about ourselves. And through children, we can get a glimpse into how to return to be honest about the approach to life. When I see my son asking earnestly about death, I am reminded that this life that I have is but an instant, and that nothing lasts forever. When I see him asking me questions regarding death, I am reminded that I too should be thinking about this issue. I am reminded that I too should not be just thinking about my day-to-day schedule and the errands that I have to run, or the meetings that I have to attend, et cetera, et cetera. That I too should be thinking about what this life is about and where this life is headed. What is the meaning of life? Is it just to earn a salary so that I can buy nice things, like a nice house, comfortable home, or nice comfortable car, wear nice and comfortable clothing? Is life just about living from day to day, concerning myself with material things and the busyness of everyday life? Or is there more to life than just those things? My son teaches me that I need to take a step back from time to time, and think about the true meaning of life. But it's not just my son. My parents teach me this lesson. My grandparents, who have passed away a long time ago, teach me this. That whenever I recall their memory, or their memorial services that we do, right, they teach me this lesson. My friends that I haven't seen in a long time teach me this point. Life is short. Life is evanescent. Now is the time to think about life, because if not now, then when? There is a very famous Japanese comedian. His name is Shimura Ken. If you know who Shimura Ken is, you know how big of an impact this person had on the internet. He is hilarious. He's a legend in terms of comedy, right? And so he, unfortunately, contracted the coronavirus and passed away, and it was very quick, right? Because I believe he was a heavy smoker, and so he passed away very quickly. It was big news, right? When he passed away, and they interviewed his brother, and his brother said that when Shimura Ken passed away, I couldn't even go to see him, right? Before he died and after he died, I could not go to see him, right? Um, uh, so can you imagine that, right? Not being able to see your family in a time of great struggle when they probably needed you the most. In one instant, your loved one is alive, and in the next, they become white ashes, as the master Renyo Shonin explains. This is why we need to turn to the Nembut's teaching and Amida Buddha's great compassion. With this teaching, right here, right now, we are always embraced within great compassion. We are never abandoned. We are never left alone to fend for ourselves. I would like to share with you a story that I once heard that might put this into perspective a little bit more. A long time ago in Japan, before the war, there lived a pregnant mother. And when she had the child, there were complications from her pregnancy. And so the healthy baby grew up to be about 2 years old, but the mother's condition worsened and she suffered from an illness that was not known at the time. So, in fear of the child contracting the illness as well, the father did not let the child around the mother. And so the mother was essentially kind of confined in her room, quarantined in her own room. So one day the doctor said that she did not have long to live. So the mother begged her husband to let her see her child one last time. And so finally the father agreed, but just for a few minutes, right? Because he didn't know what the illness was. He didn't want the child to get the illness, right? So he allowed the child to see the mother for a couple of minutes. So when the child entered the room, the mother hugged her child very tightly for a long time. What does a mother say to her child if it is the last time they will meet? Well, this is what she said. She said, when I was a little girl, my parents showed me the most important posture to take in this life. So put your hands together like this. So she puts her child's hands together in Gassho, like this. She says, this is the most important form, most important posture you can take in this life. Don't ever forget this posture, my child. Every time you feel alone, put your hands together like this to remember that the Buddha is always with you. Every time you feel lonely, put your hands together in Gassho to remember that I will always be with you. Don't ever forget this. And after that exchange, the mother soon entered into the Pure Land. The mother in this story teaches her child the most important lesson in life, the life of gratitude in awakening to truth. The child learns that the form of Gassho is none other than the humble awakening to this greater reality, the world of Amida Buddha's great compassion. The reality of great compassion accepts us as we are, despite our imperfections. I feel great comfort when I hear this story because I know that the child will be okay. The child will never be alone. In Gassho, one will always be embraced in warmth, which we call great compassion. This means that when I do Gassho, I too am never alone in this world. In knowing that she could not physically embrace her child, the mother relies on Amida Buddha's compassion to inform the child that she will be okay. We call this in Japanese omakase suru, or entrusting in Amida Buddha. Likewise, each and every one of us has our respective Nembutsu role models who teach us this truth as well. Oji-chan or ba-chan, mom, dad, otosan, okasan, right? They tell us that true reality speaks to us and that we are embraced just as we are in Amida Buddha's great compassion. In this case, for me, my son became the person who teaches me about the Buddha's compassion. When we are in Gassho and here with our hearts, that one feeling that we get is Amida Buddha speaking to us. That clench that we get in our hearts when we feel connected to a greater reality that is beyond our egocentric selves, that is Amida Buddha making itself known to us. Finally, when we can cry in joy because we know that we will be okay, and bow in the posture of genuine Gassho because we realize just how much we are being guided and cared for by the world around us. That is our connection to Amida Buddha's great compassion. So absolute truth is speaking to us, and it reveals itself to us. We do not grasp truth. Truth grasps us. And this is done through the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu. When we truly listen and hear this teaching with our whole being, we awaken to a greater reality of great compassion. So let us put our hands together in Gassho in humble gratitude and listen with our hearts to Amida Buddha's calling voice. Please join me in Gassho. Those who reach the pure land of happiness return to this evil world of the 5 defilements. Here, like the Buddha Shakyamuni, they benefit sentient beings without limit. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman Naus Naman Naus Naman Naus. Thank you very much. それでは、合唱をお願いいたします。
Naman Naus Naman Naus Naman Naus Naman Naus Naman Naus Naman Naus。
皆さんおはようございます。毎月の、小月法要の時に、短い日本語の法話を、させていただくという、ことに、なっております。先ほど英語の法話では、仏教が、問題にしようとしているところ、そしてその解決とは何かということについてお話しさせていただきました。仏教において最大の問題はこの苦悩、苦しみということなんですけれども、これが、最大の問題、とも言えます。苦というのは、詳しく、説明していきますと、宿泊っていう言葉があるんですけれども、ちょっと難しい言葉なんですが、ちょっと書かせていただきます。Let me just make sure. OK、これ見えますでしょうか。宿泊ですね。と書きます。この宿泊の、最初の宿というのは、生、老、病、死でございます。この生というのは、生まれる、あるいは生きていくということなんですけれども、そして老、old age ですね。病、sickness。and then 死は death ですね。お釈迦様が、お城から、出て見たのは、老、病、死といった3つの苦しみでした。それとプラスに生、生まれる、こと、そして、生きていく、生きるという、ことそのものは、苦しみであるということが仏教の教えであります。それはなぜかと言いますと、生も含めて、すべてのものは無常であるから、苦しむわけで、ございます。そして、その次の白なんですが、この前の4つの苦を受けて、さらにということで、残りの4つしかありませんが、それは、ちょっと難しい言葉になりますけれども、愛別離苦、そして温蔵得苦、愚不徳苦、愚不徳苦、そして、五運上苦でございます。この愛別離苦とは、愛している人、つまり、深いご縁で、つながった人たちとお別れしなければならないということ。これは主に、死んで家族、友人から、離れていかなければならないということを指しています。 で、その次に、温蔵エク。これは非常に面白い言葉なんですけれども、会いたくない人たちと会わなければならないということなんですね。これは本当にその通りだなといつも、感じさせていただきます。あの人また来たかとかね、と思うことがよくありますよね。あるいは、仕事場で一緒に働きたくない人たちに、その人たちと、働かなければならない。宿泊の中で、この、温蔵エクが一番なんか納得いく、言葉であります。面白いですね。で、その次に、具不徳句、具不徳句、とは、自分が欲しいものが得られない、ということです。あれが欲しい、これが欲しい、この欲望を満足させることは不可能であり、いつも何かを求めていき、満足することができない、そういう状態が、この具不徳句ということなんですね。でそして、ゴンジョークというのが最後にありまして、これが4番目で、8番目ですね。これは簡単に言えば、感覚、肉体感覚、この体が感じるものから来る苦しみということですね。これがゴンジョークと言います。全部、まとめて、宿泊、小、老、病、死、愛別陸、温蔵エク、具不徳句、そしてゴンジョークと言います。この間、これが、この、仏教が言う、苦しみということです。この間、ですね、パパとママは、いつか死ぬの、死ぬという言葉をなぜか死ぬというんですけれども、なぜ死ぬのというふうに聞くわけなんですね。ついに来たかと思いながら、悩んではる、我が子に、どのように答えたらいいのかなと、自分も、悩み始めます。ママとパパはいつか、死ぬよ。死ぬけど、経済とは離れないからね。皆さんがちゃんとそう教えてくださるから、心配することはないよと、言いました。確かにその通りなんですね。私は日本で、勉強させていただいたときに、ある先生がこのように、このようなお話をされました。その先生が、住職しているお寺のご門徒の方が先生のところに来て、いつも聞きます。先生、私は死んだらお浄土に行くんだね。お浄土に行くんだねと一生懸命聞くんですね。そして、先生は、はい、必ず行きます。と答えます。これが言えるのが住職の仕事なんですと、その先生がはっきり説明されました。必ずお浄土へ行きますと。ためらわずに、はっきりと自信を持って言えるのが僧侶の仕事なんだと教えられました。ここもまた、その通りだなというふうに思いました。4歳の子供と年配の方、80歳としましょうが、共に悩んでいることは、やはり死の問題なんですね。死ぬということの問題なんですね。不思議なことですね。お二人の方を並べて、考えてみますと、いろいろなご縁で自分は教えられているんだなと感じさせられました。人生がまだ始まったばっかりの、素直な状態である子供、そして人生を一生懸命生きてきた年配の方が結局悩むところが一緒のところなんですね。これは、偶然ではありませんね。私も、死に関して悩んでいるはずなんですが、日々のご多忙の中、ついに、これを忘れてしまい、または無視をするわけなんです。しかし、お釈迦様が私たちに教えてくださるのが、人生は一体何のためのものなのか、死というものをどのように乗り越えていけるのか、解決できるのかということを考えなければなりませんよということです。そしてその解決とは、阿弥陀如来様のお慈悲の世界であり、私はその温かい光の世界に包まれているということを気づかなければなりません。自分はこの四苦八苦によって苦しむのです。そして その宿泊の自分にとって一番問題になるのは、自分がいつか死ぬということです。ここが仏教の出発点であるということを改めて教えてくれたのが、真剣に悩んでいる姿を見せてくれる、まだ4歳にしかならない自分の子供でした。ここをもって私も生死、この生と死ですね。生と死の問題に向き合いながら仏法を聴聞し続けていきたいと思います。本日はようこそのお参りでございました。合唱をお願いいたします。ナマンダス、ナマンダス、ナマンダス、ナマンダス、ナマンダス、ナマンダス。ありがとうございました。